For 12 years, I dedicated myself to working in my family's business, only for my father to give it to my estranged sister and her wealthy fiancé instead of me. When they abandoned him following his heart attack, he came to me for help. I am Tessa, a 36-year-old woman, and I was pushed out of the business I had helped build, the same business my father had established just 8 months ago. For context, I've been a part of the family business for almost 12 years now. We have a jewelry business that was started by my grandfather on my father's side, and after all my dedication, I expected it would eventually come to me. After all, I am the older sister, and I've always taken a keen interest in the business ever since my teenage years. My dad, Gerald, constantly reassured me that I would eventually take over the business because my sister, Savannah, 33F, didn't seem interested in pursuing a career. She only wanted to get married and have a family. So, if there was going to be an heir to the business, it was going to be me, and that had always been taken for granted. There was no formal documentation of it, but in hindsight, I should have arranged for something like that, considering I had served as my dad's personal assistant for 12 years. I even quit my first job just 2 years after working there because I didn't want to come off as entitled and wanted to gain genuine work experience on my own before joining my father. Despite everything I'd done, I was still kicked out of the business in favor of my sister and her ridiculously rich fiancé, Landon. Savannah hadn't even been a part of the family for the past 15 years. She made some terrible decisions, and my parents cut her out of the family right after she turned 18. She had announced that she wouldn't be going to college because she wanted to explore and find herself. This didn't sit well with my parents, Gerald and Janice, and they gave her an ultimatum: either go to college or leave. Savannah, being the person she is, chose to leave and moved in with her boyfriend at the time. That relationship didn't last long, and they broke up within 6 months. She returned to our doorstep, asking to be let back into the family. Before she left, she had said some awful things to my parents, like how she didn't need them, how she was better off without a family like ours, and how they weren't good enough for her because her boyfriend's family was wealthier than us. She completely insulted and humiliated us before walking out. When she came back, my dad told her that his condition still stood: she had to go to college and get a degree, no matter the field, or she couldn't return. Savannah tried to argue her way back, but my dad stood firm. She left again, saying she'd never come back. For the next 15 years, we only saw Savannah at family events, and even then, she refused to speak to us. We learned about her life through other relatives, as she refused to keep in contact with my mom or me. Despite several attempts on our part, she cut us off simply because we were still on good terms with my father. I have to give her credit, she was stubborn and stuck to her word. Savannah didn't come back until my dad made the first move and tried to re-establish contact with her. Over time, she figured her life out, though not in the way we expected. As promised, she didn't go to college, but she moved in with a friend and started working various jobs to support herself. I think it was good for her because, over the years, she matured a lot. She switched jobs frequently, but for the past couple of years, she'd been working at an advertising agency. We knew all this because she stayed in touch with the rest of our family, and they kept us updated. About a year ago, my dad's health took a dangerous turn. He had serious heart problems, and we almost lost him. His cardiologist warned us that he needed to make drastic lifestyle changes. During that time, thinking the end was near, my dad decided to contact Savannah and end the feud between them. Savannah, having grown up considerably over the past 15 years, finally came back to the family. The day she visited us, she came alone. We didn't talk much about her life because we were too busy reminiscing about the past, and she didn't want to make it all about herself. So, she didn't tell us much about what she had been up to. The information we didn't get from our relatives was how she was doing professionally, but we didn't know anything about her personal life. Anyway, she seemed happy to be back, and we were all focused on the reconciliation between father and daughter. It was a very emotional reunion, and at the time, I was happy about it all, not knowing what was about to happen later. When she visited us for the second time, she brought along her fiancé, which came as a huge shock to all of us. She told us that she had been dating Landon, her fiancé, for the past 3 years, and they had only recently gotten engaged. No one else in the family knew about it, which is why we hadn't found out either. They had been keeping it under wraps. The flow of information wasn't just one-sided. She had also heard, thanks to our relatives, that our father was having health complications, but she didn't know how serious it was, which is why she hadn't bothered to visit sooner. She believed it wasn't appropriate to announce the engagement at that time, so she had kept it private. Now, however, she felt it was time to introduce him to the family, so she brought him along. He seemed like a nice guy, and I could tell he was well off financially. His clothes, watch, and shoes were all expensive. I was happy for my sister because it seemed like she had finally found the kind of guy she wanted, someone financially stable, who knew what he wanted in life, and had his future planned out. After talking to both of them, we learned that her fiancé, like her first boyfriend, was also the son of a wealthy man who owned a chain of fast food restaurants. But unlike her first boyfriend, this guy seemed serious about her, and it was clear they were truly in love. I was genuinely happy for her and remember congratulating them both. I never thought my father, or even my sister and her fiancé, would do what they did. But, after about 3 weeks of knowing him, my father suddenly decided it would be best to let them take over the business as well. One morning, he called me and asked me to come home because he wanted to talk about something. At the time, I was at work, as I had been the one managing everything ever since my father's health declined. I was essentially running the business, although he hadn't officially retired yet. I knew retirement was coming, and I was confident I would step up as CEO of our company. But that one day changed everything. Suddenly, my sister and her fiancé were in line to take over the business I had been managing for so long. When I arrived at my parents' house that day, my sister and her fiancé weren't there, but my parents were, and they looked grim. After some small talk, my dad finally delivered the crushing news. At first, I thought he was joking, but when I realized he was serious, I couldn't believe it. When I asked him why he would make such a decision after just 3 weeks of knowing this man, he said he had his reasons but refused to explain. After considerable arguing, he finally told me that the reason he was handing over the business to my sister and her fiancé, instead of me as promised, was because he believed they would be more capable than I am. To make matters worse, he said he thought this could be a welcome gift to them for rejoining the family, as they were about to start a new chapter by getting married in a couple of months. He believed this could be their wedding gift. I tried to convince him it was a terrible idea. No wedding gift should be as large as an entire business, just because the guy appeared wealthy. Besides, my father had always led me to believe I would inherit the business when he retired. I had built my entire life around this, and now, suddenly, he was taking it away from me to give to people who hadn't been part of our lives for the last 15 years. I tried to tell him that maybe he could make us partners in the business and attempted to bargain and negotiate with him because this was my future we were talking about. But my father was firm in his belief, saying that he was going to let them take over because he thought it would be in better hands. He believed that since my sister's fiancé's father had already built a successful business of his own, they would be able to expand our jewelry business twice as fast as I could. I begged him for just one chance, but he was not ready to listen to me, and I was heartbroken that day. I wasn't just upset because I was losing something so big, it was more about the fact that I had devoted 12 years of my life to this, only to get nothing in return. I hadn't even been able to earn my father's respect, because if he had respected the work and effort I put into the business, he wouldn't have pushed me out. That was the day I decided to cut all ties with my family because I had nothing left to say to them. I had expected my sister to at least fight for me, but she let me down as well. They gladly accepted their so-called wedding gift, which was my life's work. My sister had always known that I wanted to take over the family business once my dad retired. I had talked about it non-stop since I was 13, and I spent my whole life looking forward to it. So, it wasn't as if she didn't know that when she accepted the wedding gift, she was accepting my dreams and taking them as her own. She even made a post on social media thanking our parents for the gift and, along with it, announced her engagement. After that, no one from the family bothered to reach out to me, and I think that was the most hurtful part of all, the fact that they didn't even seem to care about me. The day I left my father's house, they stopped speaking to me, and I felt like I had been used. 12 years of my life had gone to waste. I was just thankful that I had enough savings to fall back on. For a couple of months, I could afford not to do anything and just focus on putting my life back together because I felt like everything had fallen apart. That was 8 months ago, and after that, I started therapy. I could feel myself spiraling into depression, and I knew I had to address it immediately, or I don't know what I would have done. Seeing all the posts my sister shared made me feel sick, so I had to block her. I also told my relatives that I was no longer in touch with my family and didn't want to hear anything about them. I literally requested them not to tell me anything, no matter how big it seemed, because I didn't want to know. They respected my wishes and kept everything from me. So, for the past couple of months, I had no idea that my dad's health had been steadily deteriorating, and my sister and her fiancé didn't seem to care. It wasn't until a week ago that I found out when I received a call from my dad. He told me he was in the hospital after suffering a cardiac arrest in the middle of the night and wanted me to come see him. I had blocked his number, so he had to use someone else's phone to call me. Honestly, I felt guilty about that, but then I remembered what he did to me 8 months ago, and that guilt faded. Still, once he called and told me he was suffering, I told him I would come see him right away. So, I dropped everything and rushed to the hospital. When I got there, my mom, Janice, and my dad, Gerald, were present, but to my surprise, neither Savannah or Landon were anywhere to be found. I found that strange because I assumed they were close, given they were running the family business. I couldn't help myself and asked about my sister and her fiancé as soon as I walked into the hospital room. My father, with great disappointment, told me that Savannah was too busy to come see him, and so was her fiancé. I was shocked because, having run the business for 12 years, I knew it was lucrative and mostly self-sustaining. Unless there was a major crisis, we never had to be at the workplace all day. At least, that's how it was when I was in charge. I can't say how things are now. When my dad told me they were too busy, I asked if they had come to see him at all since the heart attack. He told me they hadn't. He had called them, but they only replied by text, saying they were too busy and would visit once he was discharged. These details were shocking to me, and I could see that my father realized he had made a grave mistake by handing over the reins of the business to my sister and her fiancé. So, he told me that one of the main reasons he had called me was to apologize for what he had done. He said he felt incredibly guilty and regretful for pushing me out of the business, despite all the hard work and effort I had put in. Now, he wanted to make things right and invite me back into the family and the business. He told me about my sister and her fiancé not showing up at the hospital for him, and how he had realized they didn't care about him the way he had cared about them. He also mentioned that this wasn't even the first time they had refused to show up for him. Over the past few months, they had become disconnected. He explained that after he handed over the business to them, they started visiting him less and less. Before that, they would come by every other day to check on him, but once his health began deteriorating, they didn't bother to visit, always claiming they were too busy with work. He found this hard to believe because both he and I knew that no one is so busy they can't spare an hour from their day, especially since they lived just a few blocks away from my parents' house. He never confronted them about it, but now they had crossed a line, and my dad couldn't tolerate the disrespect anymore. He wanted to take back the company and give it to the person who truly deserved it. We discussed everything in the hospital room, and then he invited me to rejoin the business. I was overjoyed. He apologized for everything, and though I'm still not completely over it, I forgave him at that moment because, for me, nothing was more important than reclaiming what I deserved. And if that meant forgiving my father, I was willing to do it. The problem now is that he's had this conversation with my sister as well, telling her that he wants her to step away. He's finally realized that even though he has always cared for her, she has never been there for him, and he won't tolerate this level of disrespect any longer. He asked for the company back and was giving it to the person who deserved it, leaving them to figure things out on their own. Unsurprisingly, my sister is upset, and for some reason, she thinks I'm the one to blame. She called me this morning and really lashed out, accusing me of being a horrible person and saying she can't believe I would do something so cruel. I don't even understand why she's acting like this. I feel like there's something we don't know, but she's behaving as if she's lost everything, and it's all because of me. The truth is, I think it's her own fault for not visiting our dad in the hospital. I mean, a cardiac arrest is a serious issue, and she could have taken time off work to see him. She was the one being selfish, and now I'm getting what I deserved from the start. 8 months ago, she had no problem accepting a gift she knew she didn't deserve, so why should I feel guilty about claiming something that rightfully belongs to me? Anyway, she's really upset, and when I tried to console her, she hung up on me in the middle of my sentence. Now, I'm left wondering if I'm the bad guy because, every time something happens, I seem to take the fall for it. Honestly, I'm tired of this. Am I the a-hole for letting my father ask my sister and her fiancé to step out of the family business so I can take over? Update 1, thank you all so much for the responses to my post. I kind of knew I didn't deserve the backlash from my sister, but hearing it from all of you has reassured me even more. If even strangers, who know nothing about our lives, believe I deserve the business, then I have nothing more to say in my defense, nor do I think I need to. It's been a couple of days since my last conversation with my sister, and I haven't heard back from her yet. She hasn't blocked me, so that's a good sign, but I can't shake the feeling that there's more going on here than she's letting on. I don't think someone with a rich fiancé would be so upset about losing out on our business. I have a theory that maybe things aren't what they seem with her fiancé. Some of you had asked about this in the comment section of the original post, but I didn't mention it at the time because I didn't think it was relevant. However, now I believe it's important to address. I don't think my sister's fiancé and his family are doing well financially right now. From what I've heard, his dad's company has been facing loss after loss, and they haven't been able to recover for over a year. I suspect that sneaking into our family business was their way of securing a safety net, eventually hoping to take over. I still haven't figured out why exactly my sister reacted the way she did when she learned I was being asked to rejoin the family business while she was being asked to step aside. If her fiancé's family was as wealthy as she claimed, she shouldn't have been so devastated. Something just didn't add up, and I have a feeling she's going to come clean about it soon. Anyway, we're lucky that my father didn't sign any documents or officially hand over the business to my sister and her fiancé. If he had, we would have been in serious trouble. He's still the CEO, and they were only working under him in the role I used to have. He was training them to take over eventually, but now it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. I spoke to my father, and while he mentioned that my sister is very upset, he told me he can't afford to focus on that right now. His priority is to sign everything over to me so that I can take control of the business. He's already speaking with a lawyer to get the paperwork drawn up, and I'll be taking over as soon as possible, making it formal and official. Honestly, I'm really excited, and nothing, even my sister's dramatic outbursts, can dampen my mood right now. Update 2*Hi. It's been a couple of weeks since my last post, and I just wanted to let you all know that I am now officially the new CEO of my dad's jewelry business. The handover is complete, and I'm in charge. It feels amazing to finally say that. I always knew this day would come, but there were a few delays in the process because of my sister. Speaking of her, she's absolutely not happy about any of this, and I guess I can finally confirm my suspicions. My theory was right. She and her fiancé were trying to sneak their way into our family business and take over so they'd have something to fall back on when her fiancé's father inevitably let go of his company. It turns out, it was my sister who planted the idea of welcoming them back into the family by handing over the business to her fiancé in my father's mind, and unfortunately, my father fell for it. I learned all of this recently after reconnecting with my father. He admitted that he wasn't thinking straight at the time. He was swayed by the idea that someone from such an established business family would be better suited to manage everything than I was. His original plan had been to keep me in the same position I'd been working in, but when I told him I wasn't interested unless I could be the head of the company, he lost his temper. That led to these 8 months of misery for both of us. Thankfully, he came to his senses just in time, and we avoided a huge disaster because, as of now, my sister's fiancé and his father have zero credibility in the market. I had been hearing rumors about my sister's fiancé's father's business being on the verge of shutting down, but I didn't believe them because I figured my dad would reach out to me if something like that were happening. At the same time, my father assumed I would reach out to him if I had heard anything, so neither of us did, which, in hindsight, was pretty foolish. Anyway, my sister finally confessed what she was trying to do and set her ego aside to speak to me. She reached out a couple of days ago, just before it was finalized that I would become the CEO, and admitted that she and her fiancé desperately needed jobs. They aren't sure how much longer her fiancé's father's company can survive. Now she's asking me for help, and I told her I'd think about it. I don't have an issue with hiring them. It's just that I'll never be able to fully trust them again because I know what their original intentions were. That's what feels so strange to me right now. I do want to help my sister, but at the same time, how can I hire people I don't trust? Anyway, I told her I needed some time to think it over, and she has agreed to wait for now, but honestly, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. Update 3 *. So, I've decided not to hire my sister and her fiancé. I know some people may think this makes me seem selfish, but the truth is, I can't trust them. When my dad offered them the chance to take over the company initially, they accepted it without hesitation, and they didn't bother to reach out to me for 8 months. They showed absolutely no compassion or empathy for anyone other than themselves, and I don't want people like that around me or working for me. So, with a heavy heart, I told my sister that I couldn't help her. Unsurprisingly, she didn't take the news well. She showed up at my office the other day and threw a tantrum, accusing me of being heartless and selfish. She even told me that she regretted ever letting me have the company back. I found that odd because she had no part in that decision. It was entirely my father's choice. When she took over, it wasn't my decision, and now that I'm in charge, it's not hers either. For her to act as if she had done me a huge favor was ridiculous. I would have tolerated most of her outburst, but that comment really irritated me. So, I told her she hadn't done me any favors, not then, and certainly not now. She never cared about me, so it was absurd for her to expect me to do the same for her. I asked her politely to leave, but she refused and kept screaming at me, completely undermining my authority. At that point, I decided to call the police to have her escorted out because I couldn't deal with that level of drama. I'm already busy with work, and I don't need that added stress. Once the cops arrived, she didn't have much to say and just left quietly. It's been a few days since then, and I haven't heard from her, so I assume she's going to leave us alone now. But even if she doesn't, I'm prepared to take further steps. If necessary, I'll get a restraining order against her.